Welcome to episode 318 of Grid Talk. Today we're here to preview the 2023 Dutch Grand Prix. My name is Ruby Price, and joining me we have Grid Talk co-host Tom Downey.
Hello.
And Tom Horrox.
Hello.
And Phil Mathew from Grip Strip Podcast.
Hello.
But before we get into this episode, we must thank our sponsor for the episode, Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. Bet Online continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. So yes, we are previewing the Dutch Grand Prix, which means that it is indeed race week and the mid-season break is all but over. I don't know about you, but things were starting to get a bit manic on my weekends without seeing 19 cars going full throttle to try and manage second in the championship. Starting off with the AlphaTauris though, Tom Horrox, it hasn't been the fairy tale return to the grid yet for the Aussie Prince himself. Daniel Ricciardo only managing P16 last time out in Spa with his younger teammate Tsunoda leaving Belgium with a point. After a few weeks to recharge, do you expect the Red Bull sister team to do much in Zandvoort this weekend?
Well, AlphaTauri have not had a great run at Zandvoort, which is surprising given that their sister team has won both races. But with Tsunoda double DNFing for his exploits so far, and Ricciardo in a McLaren managing a glorious P11 as his best result, it's not looking great. So Ricciardo, though, I think a positive Hungary, and then a less positive, but there were some decent reasons why he wasn't as competitive in Spa. I think he's going to come out for the second half of the season now, kind of a bit more relaxed. He's got used to the car, and Tsunoda is going to be desperate to prove that he's up for it. So I think they've got something to fight for. Both drivers are going to be hungry, which is more than you can say probably for the drivers in the Haas and the Alfa Romeo seat. So I think that they are probably going to be fighting with Williams and pushing up towards the points. But yeah, I think they've got a decent chance of doing something, but historically they've not had a great Dutch Grand Prix. So I'm not holding out many hopes. Maybe they could sneak a point here or there. Who knows?
Sneak a point here or there. Phil, in our mid-season driver grades episode, which is available to listen to where you get your podcast from, we gave Bottas a C and Joe a D. The Alfa Romeos have been fairly anonymous this season, but are ahead of the AlphaTauris by 6 points. Do you think we should expect anything from them this weekend?
It's debatable, Ruby. I don't know. I mean, it's just like it is. They're irrelevant, or they're anonymous, or we'll see. It's like kind of how Valtteri and Zhou were playing the games on the grid, guess the grid, and guess who's the oldest, guess who's the youngest. Like Valtteri Bottas didn't know anything. It's kind of like their car. It's completely anonymous. They could put one together. They could go and have a good qualifying run, or they could end up being out in Q1 and being lapped twice by Max Verstappen. It's entirely both of those things are possible. They are going to keep ahead. That's their battle now, to be ahead of AlphaTauri. So trying to keep it in check with Yuki and also Daniel Ricciardo. That's the game plan. I don't think there's going to be much from the weekend for them. Try to get through clean and then get to the Italian Grand Prix, where I think they'll have a better chance with their low downforce package and being able to have that. They might be able to do better there. I don't think it'll be a great weekend for them personally, but hey, stranger things have happened.
Stranger things have happened, and Formula One is all about stranger things happening. But tied with Williams then on 11 points in P8 is currently the Haas team. Tom Downey, it's a close fight between these three teams, but after a string of poor results, it is Haas that have been falling backwards. What are you expecting from the American team?
From Haas again, to be honest, I'm expecting probably an all right qualifying. I'm expecting Hulkenberg to out qualify Magnussen, and I'm expecting them to fall back and probably fall out the points in the race. I mean, I don't think there's much more we can say about Haas, to be honest. You know, they're good over 1 lap pace, but their race pace just seems to die off a cliff after a couple of laps. I think mainly because their tires die off a cliff, because that car seems to be really, really heavy on its tires. So, you know, there's the car's got potential, the team's got potential. You know, Hulk is somewhat leading that team now. You know, it's one of the things I talked about in my hot take check. Yeah, you know, K-Mag needs to buck his ideas up a bit. And yeah, I'm expecting a fairly anonymous weekend from them, to be honest.
Yeah, a fairly anonymous one, but you know, they might show up in qualifying because obviously you mentioned that 1 lap pace, and Hulkenberg has been routinely out qualifying his teammates so far this season. You know, once again showing that 1 lap pace that he's pretty much always had. But it's just, you know, the race pace that's just letting the team down, and you know, they're just not really performing as, you know, Gunter Steiner particularly would be hoping for. But it makes you wonder how the supply of doors is going. But Tom, Alex Albon has been one of our highest rated drivers so far this season. Firstly, is all of the hype true? But also, can Williams build on the momentum after a few weeks away from the action?
Well, as I said on the Driver Grades podcast at the start of the summer break, it's you with Albon, you have to temper your expectation a little bit. You know, when you saw him alongside Max Verstappen, he looked very ordinary, which, you know, but everyone looks ordinary alongside Max Verstappen, and we just don't have a reading on Sargent yet. So, you know, his teammates have been Latifi and Sargent, so it's not really a strong base for comparison at the moment. I think. Yeah, he got a P12 here last year, which, given that the car is not suited to this type of circuit at all, it's that's pretty impressive. His teammate is not only a rookie; he's never raced in Formula One. Here, he had a dubious, he had a bit of an off in the feature in F2, but he did manage to qualify in P3 for the feature in F2. So he has got a bit of experience in running reasonably well here, and did get a P6 in the sprint. So he's okay here. So let's go and see with F2 experience, will that translate to F1? So far this year, it hasn't. So I'm not holding out a lot of hope. But Albon, I think, yeah, he's definitely proving on the qualifying side of things that he can out-qualify and as well outrace Logan Sargent, who just doesn't seem to be putting it all together. But I think the second half of the season will see an uptick from Logan Sargent. I think we'll see him start to becoming a little bit more consistent. He's had a nice time for a reset now and just go again. He's under no pressure from Williams. I think there's not an awful lot of people that they can plug into that seat, unless they were looking to try and get a Palou in from IndyCar. Might be an opportunity for them. Definitely with some marketing opportunities there as well. But I don't think they're gonna sack off their long-term project, Logan Sargent, because he's the first graduate of that Williams Academy, that rather new Williams Academy, and they want to make that work. And to bin him off after a season would not be a good idea. So I think he's fairly safe. And I think this hopefully will be the start of a better second half of the season for Logan Sargent. So I'm going to say the similar thing to what I said from my previous team, that I can see them potentially sneaking a point. And maybe this is where Logan Sargent does get that lucky break, holds it all together, keeps, you know, does the Alex Albon style defense, and does bring home a P10 for the team, or, you know, to at least get him on the board and contributing to this actually quite a decent year for Williams.
Yeah, absolutely. A point for the man with stars and stripes would certainly go amiss. And if you want to give us some stars, you can leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or a 5-star rating on Spotify. But Phil, the Alpines of Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly have been in the wars and walls numerous times this season. And after a number of big changes during the mid-season break, including Otmar Zafnauer obviously leaving, there's been a lot of talk about the team not having the stability to challenge for the front of the midfield. How important is it for Alpine to perform in Zandvoort?
I mean, they spend more time in the news with all the controversy going on with their team, Ruby, and it's supposed to be about racing. Can they go out there after a few weeks off? Maybe the reset helps them. having reliability fundamentally is the number one problem for them when they're not crashing into each other or making mistakes or whatever. But they have the drivers. They have the ability to go and score points, at least one of them, if not both. Pace wise on this circuit, I think they're in the mix to contend for Q3. Definitely should be in Q2. But I mean, they spend more time with all the, you got Otmar Safnauer, still talking. You got all these other team principals that used to be there talking. You have drive. I mean, I'll tell you who's really happy, and you're going to talk about it, is Oscar Piastri, because he bailed out of that. The one time that Zach Brown actually did a good signing was when he went and stole Oscar Piastri from them, and that's actually been a good thing for him. But I think they should be on the fringes of contending for points. They should be contending for a Q3 spot. But I really don't know what their battle is because they're kind of in no man's land. McLaren is well ahead. Ferrari kind of is in the same boat, but they have a lot more points. So they're just they need to just finish races. Finish races, get some data, find your spots here and there in the second half of the season to pick areas where you might be able to capitalize, or because this has been a really bad start to this year, and the PR side of it has been just as bad, if not worse.
Absolutely. And of course, Alpine have been a team with a lot of PR on them. Rob McElhaney and Ryan Reynolds. Yes, Ryan Reynolds being, two people who've come in as part of a group that have taken a share in their ownership. But yeah, not quite, the excellent performance that we've seen from other sporting ventures that those two have become involved in. But it has been a rapid trajectory for McLaren over the last few races, with Piastri and Norris impressing everyone with some brilliant drives. Tom Downey, we could have seen Piastri on the podium in Spa last time out before a rogue Carlos Sainz took that out of the equation. Will he be able to bounce back this weekend?
If you'd have asked me a few weeks ago, like after Silverstone, I'd have probably said no, because of how I thought McLaren were going to struggle in a place like Hungary. But the progress McLaren have made this season, it's remarkable, and Piastri is doing exceptional things in that car. He's proved the hype. He's proved that Zach Brown was right to sign him, and that he was right to dump Ricciardo. I'm not going to go over that again, but like I said, if you'd have asked me a couple of weeks ago, like before Silverstone, like 6-8 weeks ago, if I'd have thought that McLaren would have been looking for a decent result in Zandvoort, I'd have probably said no, because I thought their sort of setup and their upgrades were still going to struggle in the sort of slow to medium corners. But we saw how well they did in Hungary, and Zandvoort has some similarities with the sort of like Hungary type setup. So I think the sort of progress they showed, provided they get their actual setup on the day correct, I think they could have been in for a decent result. I really want to see Piastri get a podium. Zandvoort is a tricky circuit. Obviously a lot of off-camber corners. You look at turn 3 and turn 10, and then the final banking, which is turn 12 or 13, I think. It might be a bit more of a bump back down to reality for them, but I'd expect to see both cars in Q3 and pushing for sort of like top 6 at least.
A bit of ambition there for the McLaren, who, let's remember, at the start of the season were not doing very well at all. But Tom, we are checking if it's even worth making any predictions for how Ferrari are going to perform. We do have to try and come up with something. It's Murphy's Law in their strategy department of, if it can go wrong, it will. But what will they be hoping goes right?
I think they're hoping that the stopped clock is going to that is going to be this weekend, where at some point in the season they've got to pick the right strategy. They did it once earlier this season. I think they picked I forget the race at the moment, but I do remember a race where I was thinking, what are they doing? And then it turned out it was a really good call. I forget which one it is, but I mean, they're due another one, so let's wait and see. I do think, Canada. Thank you for that. Leclerc looks like the stronger driver based on previous history at this track, with a couple of with a P3 and a P5. So there's a chance of a podium in there. I know that the car isn't as good as it was last year, but by this time last year, Red Bull were already in the ascendancy, and they were just on the verge of kind of falling away in the title race. So I think it's there's a chance of them doing something if they get some strategy right as well. They've never finished outside the points here. So if you're looking at some positivity here, P5, P7, P3, and P8 are the last 2 years. So they're always getting some points. So strong points are definitely a possibility. Potentially a podium if some circumstances go their way. I think it probably will suit their car to some degree. Maybe not. It's difficult to say really, because it's still got such a limited sample set on this circuit, and both times we've raced here, it's been with two completely different types of regulations. So it's very difficult to pick out trends and say that various corners are going to suit various cars, and because we've never seen an evolution of a car at this circuit before, so it's going to be difficult to say for sure. But I think we are going to see Ferrari doing well. I think they'll probably be in that fight with McLaren. I think Aston Martin will probably sit just behind them, and I think it'll be McLaren, Ferrari fighting it, and then I think it's going to be the Mercedes and the Mercs fighting out for the win. I say fighting out for the win. You can guess where I think that's going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. The few things that have been consistent about Zandvoort, of course, well, whilst we've been racing in Zandvoort, is Max with a performance like no other, and flares in the crowd, and preferably not on the track this time around, giving us a very late safety car. But Phil, a lot of talk during the mid-season break about Lance Stroll and his ultimately secure seat at Aston Martin. Fernando Alonso's just about keeping P3 in the driver standings, but they've fallen back and struggled in the second quarter of the season. Can Aston Martin deliver in Zandvoort?
I think Fernando Alonso can deliver at Zandvoort. If they match what they did at Monaco, of course. There's also the notion that Stroll shows up once or twice a year in qualifying and puts together a race, so maybe the break helps him and he shows up this weekend. While I appreciate all you guys and trying to defend the guy. I've never been a fan. I never will be. And it doesn't really matter in this sense, because he'll have lifetime membership. So it's really a case of Fred doing his job, going and taking this reset and being able to keep Aston Martin in the mix, not just in the Drivers' Championship amongst the group that they're with, but also in Constructors. I think he should be in the top 5 or 6, both in race and in qualifying. Personally, Stroll flirting with should be in the points, may not get in the top 10 at shootout itself, but get into the top 10. The way that the track is, the way the pit delta, it's a shorter pit road too. So it's there's things in the favor of Aston if they do things the right way, to get a successful weekend out of it. I know that Stroll has had good moments at Monza, so I'm sure he wants to go there and see if he can go and bring those back and have that happen. But at least for this weekend, I think it's more about Fernando doing his thing than Lance.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, it could have been a win for the Mercedes this time last year, but division in their strategies and charging Max Verstappen cost them. With their side pods and floor changes, they've been stronger, but the fight for P1 is long gone now. Can the duo, though, manage to fight for a win, perhaps?
No. Couldn't be honest. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Red Bull fan, but if anybody's going to get close, you'd probably say it's going to be the Mercs, but that Red Bull in Max's hands, yeah. But Mercedes, they're just going to have to focus their attention on P2, both in the constructors and maybe in the drivers. But given to the sort of early form of Alonso, that might be out of reach. I don't know how Mercedes is going to go around here. Since they bought the side pods, who knew side pods would work so well? Just ask AJ Newey. They have done better. They are making improvements. Hamilton sort of almost seems a bit rejuvenated this year. Russell is arguably a bit of a weak link at the moment in that team. I'm not saying he's a bad driver, far from it. But yeah, it's. Mercedes, they'll probably be duking out with. Can we even say Ferrari at the minute, because they'll probably send the cars out on snow change when it's 38 degrees or something, or something equally as daft as that. Yeah, they'll probably be duking out with McLaren. They might sneak in front of a start. They might, they might sneak into lead because we've seen it before. Max doesn't start that well from P1. That's usually his sort of like weakest area, you could say. So if you saw in Australia, if Russell or Hamilton starts P2 or P3, they might get around him going into turn 1. Who knows? And it would be nice to see someone else win. I'd rather it be McLaren just because it's McLaren, but I think Mercedes probably do have the best chance.
Yeah, they are the team who you would probably back to take the win if Red Bull do something wrong, or a miracle happens, and during the time during this summer break where they have been allowed to work on the car, they've found the ultimate solution that gives them 1,000,000 horsepower and all of that jazz. But Tom Horrox, it is a home party for the Dutchies, with the golden boy Max Verstappen, the favourite to win, put it on pole, but a much less certain weekend for Sergio Perez. There has been talk during the summer break about F1 maybe it's been speculation, but talk about, them taking DRS out of qualifying because, of its definition as an overtaking aid. Obviously, I think you've been quite vocal in being against that as a thing to be brought in mid-season. Just what are your thoughts? Obviously, the talk is it will affect Red Bull the most if that is the case. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the DRS quali situation?
Yeah, I'm against it in that it probably would make things a little bit closer, but I just don't think that's right. I get that if someone's doing something they shouldn't be, then you should stop them, but they're doing everything according to the rules. I'm all for removing DRS in qualifying for the start of next season. But let's be honest, if Red Bull were incredibly fast in the straight line but had a very low DRS delta, they wouldn't even be talking about it. And that's the problem. It's not that there's a problem that needs fixing. It's not there's a safety issue where they've suddenly realized that DRS is causing issues on straights and safety issues and things. It's not because of that. It's not for any reason other than they want to slow Red Bull down. And that for me isn't right. That kind of thing has got to be done closed season, or has got to be done as part of a wider strategy to close off safety loopholes or anything like that. But yeah, so that's my kind of thoughts on that. But Red Bull as a team, yeah, I mean, we're going to see them dominant. You take a few miles an hour off the straights off them, they're still going to be the fastest package overall. It's not going to make a vast difference this season. And then if they bring this in now, next season they'll have already dialed it out of the car setup anyway. So it's purely just an effort to try and slow Red Bull down now, which for me is just wrong. Perez on this track, Perez this season, if he ever beats Max, he wins the race. He's never finished ahead of Max without winning a race. So you never know. This could be the time. Max 10-2 for race results over Perez. So I think it's pretty obvious what's going to happen. But you never know. This could be that time when I have to finally go to my wish list and click on that sombrero and go get it on now, ready for the preview of the next race.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to question as to whether Red Bull will allow anyone but Max Verstappen to win his home race. But Phil, I'm coming to you as well on this DRS thing. Obviously, do you agree with Tom's perspective on this about bringing it in mid-season purely just because it's an attempt to stop Red Bull? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree with what Tom's saying, and that I mean the reality of the world is, okay, fine. Max, instead of qualifying on pole by 0.6 of a second or 0.7 of a second, it's 0.3. He's still on the pole. So who cares? I mean, it's really a whole bunch of nothing. If you're going to go and tell me they're going to go and give rocket boosters to everybody else on top of it, then maybe we could have a conversation, but we know that's not going to happen. It's not going to turn into Mario Kart, even if Liberty Media wants it to be that way. It's and even with that, you have Newey sitting there, the boy. Yeah, and that's true. They don't let Checo win at Mexico the last 2 years when he's had the freaking championship too. But that having the DRS or taking away DRS in qualifying is not something that really does anything for me. It really is much ado about nothing. So I mean, if they want to do it, they'll do it, but Red Bull is still going to be the fastest at all these places. So it really doesn't make a difference, in my opinion.
Yeah. Tom, Downey, finally, just to come to you, last point on this topic. Taking it out of the context of course, like right now it's because Red Bull have got a car that ultimately maximizes its DRS. Like from a standpoint, we've obviously got we used to have DRS. You could activate it during practice whenever you wanted. We used to have even the sort of precursor to DRS being, like McLaren's F duct, where they just, would stall the wing by covering up a hole in the cockpit. It's obviously an overtaking aid. Like, should we have it in qualifying? That is ultimately the question, I guess. But we want qualifying to be the fastest possible lap, don't we?
We do want qualifying to be the fastest possible lap, but that shouldn't be fundamentally reliant on DRS opening. To have one lap pace, it's not just about opening the rear wing, because it's going to be more effective in some circuits than it is in others. It will depend on where the activation point is, how long the straight is, where the activation zone ends. Obviously, drivers will be braking before the DRS zone ends, unless their pedals disconnect on F123. Sorry, mate. Yeah, that was a sore topic. It's getting the most out of a car. It's not always about the top speed, because if you have such good top speed coming down a straight, you might end up outbraking yourself going into a turn, and then if your setup is not conducive to having a good flow through a corner, so if you suffer with sort of with poor traction on the exit, or if you have chronic understeer when you turn into the corner, what's the point in having all that speed on the straight? Because you will just lose any advantage which you gained anyway. And your DRS was introduced as an overtaking aid. It is marketed as an overtaking aid. It's not a top speed aid. Yes, the system aids in achieving a higher top speed, but it's not an aid which is there to give you purely, a higher top speed. I mean, yes, it does that, but it is an overtaking aid. That's what it's called. And to sort of draw comparisons, and Tom, I fully get your point where you said about not introducing things mid-season, because it does sort of almost make a bit of a mockery, or it's not right. You could argue. 2020, the FIA clamped down on party modes, or quali modes, or spicy chili modes, whatever they were called, Nando's extra hot modes, on engines. I think it was around the time of the Italian Grand Prix, I think it was, which is when Mercedes said, okay, so we'll just have our engine going nyawn every single weekend. That's a technical phrase. So if I get your point about not doing it mid-season, and I agree with that. However, the FIA have already set a precedent that they can fundamentally change things mid-season. or mid race. So let's so I'm not good over that one. And it's I know there's probably more to it than that, but I think if they can do it, they will. They probably will. I think it should not be in qualifying, and I think you should maybe go as far to a point as if you're lapping a car, so the car in front of you has blue flags, you don't get the RS, but that's a whole nother thing, because you don't necessarily overtake a car that you've already overtaken or started behind you. So it's a bit of a slippery slope in that sense. But there's a whole raft of things I changed about F1. If I was given the keys to the kingdom, and I ain't got enough time to go over that. So yeah.
Tom Downey with the hot takes. And if you want more hot takes, you can listen to last week's episode of Grid Talk, where we discussed our hot takes for Formula One. And there was quite a few spicy things said during that show. Thoroughly recommend checking it out, and not just because I was on it. But now that we've sort of, talked about DRS and all of the teams, let's make some predictions. So Tom Horrox, your prediction, please, for pole position and the podium.
So I'm going to try and turn over a bit of a new leaf for the second half of the season and predict things that are a little bit more realistic, as opposed to me just trying to manifest things into existence. But I'm going to start off that new leaf by predicting something which is only ever happened once before in Formula One, which is a George Russell pole. I think he's going to come out in the second half of the season, and he's going to be a lot quicker. He does well when he has these mental resets, and having only scored 33% of the points of Mercedes in the first half of the season, that's going to have knocked his confidence a bit. But I think after a reset, a bit of time away, he's going to come back, and I think Mercedes will be competitive at this circuit. So I think he's going to steal pole position. I'm not as positive for the race, though. I think it's going to be a Verstappen win with Leclerc a surprise second, with Russell bringing home the podium in third.
A lot of Russell support there for the pole position. Phil, your pole position prediction and your podium prediction for the race, please.
Max Verstappen pole, Max Verstappen win. Behind him, we'll say I'll go with Lewis and Lando as my podium.
Lewis and Lando, with Max Verstappen very much the favourite for the top step.
Yep.
Tom Downey, your pole prediction and your podium prediction, please.
Pole is hard to look past Max. The rich sort of vein, or the sort of, I think of my words right then at all. The sort of the form he's in. He's just he's gonna get it, especially in his home race. Just keep the flares out, please. Don't let people in with flares. I know you said Rubius want to echo that. It's stupid. It's dangerous. As for my race podium, provided Max finishes, he's going to finish P1. P2. I'm going to say George Russell. I think Tom made a good point about him sort of having a mental reset, sort of like being like, right, okay, come on, we need to do this. The car's better, the driver's looking more comfortable in the car. He has showed that he's good. He's a good racer. He's an aggressive racer, so that could pay dividends, or he could end up in the barriers. Who knows? And then P3, I'm going to say Carlos Sainz. If Ferrari lets him pass Leclerc.
Interesting. So that's two people at least with Ferrari podiums. Everyone's got Verstappen, and there's a Mercedes on them as well. But yeah, so how about something a bit bolder than, not Max Verstappen being on pole? Tom Horrox, what is your bold prediction?
My bold prediction is something. I think that it's going to be a more competitive race, and that's probably going to be down to circumstance. But I think there's going to be a late pass for the win. And I think we're talking like the last 5 laps is going to be someone who's going to have to make an overtake for the win. I'd say somebody, it's going to be Verstappen, but there's a possibility that it could be a late safety car and someone with a massive tyre offset might come and make the pass on Verstappen. You never know. We live in hope. So there's that's my prediction, that there's going to be a late pass for the win, which I don't think has happened all year. And I'd just like to correct myself when I said earlier he's only had 1 pole. George Russell, he had 2. Apologies, that was my brain just not quite re-engaging with the second half of the season yet.
Not quite re-engaging. It is the mid-season break still for now. We'll let you off so far, Tom Horrox. But Phil, your bold prediction, please, for Zandvoort.
Well, I'm going to keep on going until it happens. I'm going to say Logan Sargent scores a point, and not just the American bias, which is obvious, but I'm just going to do it. George did it for a long time for George Russell, Mr. This, and now I'm going to do it for Logan. It may probably not this week, more likely next week at Monza, because they have a great low downforce package. But hey, want to have the positive vibes going there for Logan and Williams.
Positive vibes for Logan Sargent. Tom Downey, your bold prediction, please.
Daniel Ricciardo signs for Red Bull. No. Imagine.
That's not a prediction. That already happened.
No, you know what I mean. Just let me have this, Ruby. No, I'm going to say both the Saubers, or Alfa Romeos, or Audis, or BMW Williams, or whatever they're called, in the points.
Wow. I mean, they've had a pretty anonymous season so far, so that would definitely make it bold for them to get double points again. But yeah, that is our predictions. Now for some promo. So, Tom Horrox, you are also from the Monkey Seat podcast, so why don't you tell us about that?
Me and Carl are on the Monkey Seat, and we do a podcast from Ireland, me from the UK, and I'm actually going to be in person with him tomorrow. I'm picking him up from the airport, so that's going to be fun. Who knows? We may even record a podcast while we're there. But it's just 2 mates having a laugh about Formula One and him generally claiming that George Russell is useless, and me just trying to not offend people, but failing as well. So if you fancy coming to give us a support, then we're at Monkey Seat Pod on all the socials and monkeyseatpod.com. Come and have a listen.
Yeah, and there's 100 of those episodes to listen to. The latest with Statman Sean Kelly. Very much enjoyed listening to that. Phil, you're from Grip Strip Podcast. Tell us about that. Where can people listen to things from you?
You can find the Grip Strip Podcast on basically anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're on 182 episodes this past week. Been slacking on my end, so I need to get them out. Josh, my co-host, has posted the video feeds of both of those episodes, so you can see it on our YouTube page for Grip Strip Podcast. You can also find the shows when I actually upload them on philipgmatthew.com, my blog site. And you can find me, PG Matthew 28, Josh at JP Huffine, and Grip Strip Pod on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. And thanks to you, Rubes, for great job, and always great to be with the Toms here, and always good to contribute here on the Grid Talk and get the merch, since get a cup like this, or a shirt or a coaster
or a cup like this as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks, Phil. But Tom Downey, you also are a co-host of Formula Talk, so why don't you tell us about that?
Why the devil not, eh? So Formula Talk I do with one of the Grid Talk panelists, Sophia. I think we were supposed to record yesterday, but I forgot, to be honest. I've had a busy few weeks. In fact, no, we're on our summer shutdown, actually. It's like my brain still is. So we cover off all things non-F1. He says it's mainly F2, F3, and F1 Academy, as we don't really have time to cover every single open wheel series that exists. But yeah, it's predominantly F2, F3, the sort of road to F1 kind of thing, to coin a phrase from F1 themselves. Yeah, it goes out weekly. Everywhere you find Grid Talk, you'll find Formula Talk.
Yeah, and if you want to hear more from me, you can listen back to most of the Grid Talk shows. But also, if you want to find me on socials, it is at Rubes or at Rubes001 if you can't find me with at Rubes. But yeah, Grid Talk is available on YouTube, where most episodes are recorded live. This being a preview, it was not, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Cast. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our huge back catalogue of shows, previews and reactions to qualifying and the race results. Please consider supporting the channel on Patreon so we can get mics, lights and better recording equipment, and also make sure you subscribe so you're the first to know when each new episode is released. We'll be back soon with plenty more F1 content and of course the Dutch Grand Prix. But thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye.